the Old Testament is full of God's wrath against people who didn't do things exactly the way he wanted, and his response was to murder them. He's killed children. The Bible was actually written by humans. I wonder what their motive was. My name is Tracey Brenneman, and I have been in state government and county government for 30 plus years, actually 33, doing primarily child welfare work, which is social work, child protective services, foster care, adoption, and everything that goes with that. And most recently, my position with the state has been child welfare business integration manager. And in that role, I've been helping them design the computer system that social workers will be using, and then interfacing that system with other state systems, which I know sounds like completely, opposite of each other, which it is. So I had to change my child welfare brain for a technology brain. But as of today, I'm retiring and gonna take a couple weeks off and then start doing some contract work. So working with agencies and to improve outcomes for children and families in the state. So
congrats on your retirement.
Thank you.
I appreciate you spending some of that time here with me today.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about your background. So I know you had a background preaching. You told me you were not technically a pastor, though, for an interesting reason. So
yeah.
Can you kind of set the stage for that and tell me about that?
So I was a minister in the Baptist church and also served a couple of churches in the Presbyterian and Methodist denomination, but primarily Southern Baptist. And my title varied depending on the church I was serving. I was minister of education, minister of youth, minister of music. So basically, responsible for all those programs for supporting the congregation. I spoke, but I wasn't considered a preacher because I wasn't ordained because I'm a woman. And from what I understand, the Southern Baptist Church still does not ordain women. I do believe the Presbyterians and the Methodists, for the most part, now will ordain a woman, but there's some verses in the Bible that some people interpret to mean that women should not speak out in church. And the Southern Baptists have embraced that to keep women from having that role in the church. So even though I kind of functioned in that role, I wasn't ever considered the pastor or the head. I was just a minister. So yeah, and I did that part-time. I did that full-time when I got out of college. I actually majored in religion in college and did that full-time for a short amount of time. And then because of some life choices and all, ended up doing full-time child welfare, social work, mostly to take care of my family. And I did part-time ministry for about 20 years. So.
So tell me about how you were raised as far as religion. Like, what was your household like?
Yeah, we were kind of like the Christmas Easter people, and raised in the Lutheran church. I was in Texas then, born and raised in Texas. And we were sent for, we went for a little while, like for Sunday school. And in the Lutheran church, you go through, a process to, well, first you're baptized as an infant, so that happened. And at least I'm told. I don't remember that, but I'm told that happened to me. And then you go to school to learn, all of the Lutheran creed and all, they call it catechism. And you get confirmed in the Lutheran church, and you're a full-fledged member at that time. So I think I was around, 10 or 11 when that happened. So did go through that process, but that was pretty much it. We weren't like, regular involved church folks. Then when I was 13, we moved to North Carolina, and my family did not attend church from that point on. I started attending with a friend. So.
So did you have some kind of experience that like a religious experience from your perspective that really got you deep into it? Is it surprising to me that you came into it after that kind of lukewarm?
Yeah. So I did. When I was about 14, I guess, and I was in middle school, and of course we had moved to North Carolina. I was, this big, tall, red-headed really smart kid because I guess the school system was ahead in Texas, or at least in Houston, from North Carolina. And I did really well in school. That was kind of like my happy place because my family wasn't very close and parents weren't real involved. And so, I got my affirmation from school and from teachers. So I always excelled in school. And so I got picked on a lot when we first moved here. I've always been a big girl too, so you got the big girl with the red hair and smart and weird from Texas. So got bullied a lot. And I made this friend whose name also happened to be Tracey, who was very involved in her church, which happened to be Southern Baptist Church. And we had a common interest in music. She was a guitar player, a very talented guitar player, and she wrote music, and I liked to sing. And we would, get together and sing. And she's actually the person that told me to quit singing like a mouse because I didn't know I really had a voice. And I remember vividly her just like yelling at me, just sing already. And I did. And it was kind of like, oh, wow, I can do this. I'm pretty good at it. So I started, she invited me to go to church with her and joined the choir, which was really cool, the youth choir. They did like musicals and things. And so that's how I began to get involved in church. And Southern Baptists are very evangelical. It is impressed upon you, that your role is to bring people to Christ, bring people to Jesus so that they have that salvation experience. And so, people started talking to me about that and about how important that was. And, as I got more and more involved in the music of that church, more involved with Tracey as a friend, and then some other things, then eventually on January 29th, 1978, I had a salvation experience in the church where I just, it was a very emotional service and felt a lot of emotion. And what would happen in this particular denomination is when you felt that call or that pull to God, you would go up to the front and talk to the pastor, and that's when people got saved. And so I had a moment like that where I was thinking, okay, this is something I want to do. And I remember going up there, and my friend was so happy and excited. She was crying, and the people in the church were happy. And I'll never forget, it was funny because I was all in this emotional moment, and then this lady takes me over to the front pew and pulls out a little card and starts getting my address and name and stuff. And I remember thinking, well, what's that for? And it was to put me on the church rolls because now I was one of them, because I'd had this moment. But that was my salvation experience. And I was, let's see, what was I in 78? 17? I was born in 62. I can't do the math. But anyway. So, continued to stay involved in the church. Music was a big pull for me because that was my thing. That's still my thing. And, then a lot of other things happened after that. I don't know if you want me to keep going or...
Sure, let me ask you this. So it sounds like you, it kind of started with this social connection or whatever, more the emotional side.
Yes.
Obviously, when you went to college, you would have gotten more into some of the theology, right? Some of the texts.
Yes, and actually started even then because I was involved with the youth group, and we did mission trips and all where we would go and evangelize other folks when we would do things like help people with their houses or whatever, and so that whole idea of my responsibility to win the world to Christ was something that was impressed upon me. So much of the focus of my life became that this is my responsibility, and if I don't do it, bad things are going to happen to these other folks because everyone needs to know about Christ. So that was impressed upon me, but at that point I wasn't even thinking about ministry or anything like that. I was just into the music, but then some, and a lot of it I think was because my parents were I've had someone else say that I was at least neglected, if not abused. And that's a whole another story. And that's probably true. So I didn't really have anybody that was interested in what was happening in my life. So, and these people were, particularly Tracey and her family. Her mother was very devout, very motherly. Like, like if I needed something for school and my family didn't provide it, she would do that for me. So it really was like a family for me. And I needed that at that point in my life. So I got that affirmation, I think, from the church and from this family. I didn't feel special. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, but because of my singing, and I guess I had some talent, so I stood out for that and got a lot of affirmation for that. So it just, I think, was what really drew me even more into that and embracing that. And of course, it was explained to me that was all gifts from God and that it all came from God. So, then I felt good from these people. I felt love from those people. And so I equated all of that with God at that time. The confusing thing that happened was that Tracey had I found out later on there was some childhood trauma for her, but she actually began to engage me in a personal relationship, which became a romantic relationship. And so here I am in a church that condemns homosexuality, but this person that led me to Christ is now leading me to that. And because I didn't have love in my life, I fell in love with her, and this relationship became my life. So here I'm in this kind of microcosm of this, relationship with this person within this church that would, just completely condemn, as well as with the community, because back then especially certainly there's even now condemnation, but so all of that was going on for me as a teenager. And, and I would spend lots of hours agonizing over that and, knowing I was a sinner and it was wrong. And, we would agonize over that whole situation. And then she decided she wanted to be with somebody else and broke up with me. This was my senior year in high school. And then I really didn't know what to do with myself because, this was what my world had become, this person in this church. And someone, unbeknownst to me, I still don't know who it was, had nominated me for a scholarship to a Baptist college. It was a full academic scholarship for the most part. I think I had to work like 10 hours a week, but other than that, it was all paid for. I think there was like 600 nominees, and they picked 6 of us. And they got really quick, funny story. I was told later there were like 6 professors that interviewed everybody, and they asked people a lot of questions. So here I come into this room, and they're asking all these interview questions, the professors and stuff. And they asked me, if you could be anybody in history, who would you be? And I said, Simonetta Vespucci. And they were like, who's that? And I said, the model for Botticelli's Birth of Venus, which is a naked chick on a shell, right? Yeah, here in a Baptist college. But that's the truth, and they were like, well, why? And I'm like, well, my hair is the same color. She was beautiful. I really identify with the Renaissance because I was really into history, still am too. And later on, one of the professors told me, as soon as you walked out of the room, I was like, she's one. Because everybody else had said Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and here I come up with Simonetta Vespucci. So, anyway, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of funny. You'd have thought they'd have said I was the devil and threw me out, but they didn't, to their credit. So they thought that was kind of cool. At least they probably had to look it up later. I don't know if they knew what I was talking about. But so anyway, so I found myself on my way to college, and ironically, had a big party the night before, went to college, got drunk, because during this time also of being involved with the church and this person, we were very involved in drugs and all kind of crazy stuff. I mean, it's insane that I survived those years because it was so much going on. But I get to college, and I'm majoring in music. So I started out in music, vocal performance, and not to toot my horn, but they believed in my potential so much they actually put me with the senior vocal teacher. So I was actually on track to, I probably could have done opera if I'd have stuck with it, but I hated music theory. Because to me, music theory is math, and I'm like, no. You can't teach somebody how to write a song. It's either in here or forget it, So I rebelled in my mind against that. But I was only there a short amount of time, and I was really struggling because I didn't have Tracey. I didn't have my family. I didn't really couldn't relate to these other girls that were there. And of course, I couldn't talk about the relationship with Tracey, which, by the way, I'm not homosexual, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just not. I just was, this person showed me love, and so I think that's why I was willing to be part of the relationship. So I was,
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
Did you and Tracey have like language you would use to like compartmentalize these things? Did you ever talk about like sort of the elephant in the room with regards to
the religion and
friendship and the faith, how that all went together?
Yeah, we would when we were alone, of course, we kind of did what we wanted, and everything was on, what we used to call on the down low, right? Back in the 80s, that was the terminology. We had a code language and everything. So it was all very, secretive. And when we would go to Bible study and things at the church, of course we would hear that those things were wrong. Her mother walked in the room one time and I think began to be suspicious about what was going on with us, and so had some conversations with Tracey. So we knew people were kind of like on to us. People had made some snide comments. I think we actually had like left a note somewhere at school that somebody found. It was in code, but it was enough, you could kind of figure out there's something going on with these two, right? So we were different. We were weird. We were musicians. We were theater geeks, so we were easy targets anyway for people to pick on us. And so we would agonize because we were told at every place we went that it wasn't right for us to be involved in a relationship. And what we read in the Bible, what was interpreted to us as what the Bible said about those things, made us ashamed of it. And so yeah, it was, when we would go back and forth, we would stop because it's like, this is wrong. And then we would go back to it. I think because we were lonely, we were broken. She had some abuse in her life that I wasn't even aware of, that I found about later on. So it was like guilt and shame. It was this constant guilt and shame over everything. And the drug part was more, I didn't like seek out drugs. It was like we went to this club in Charlotte that, don't ask me why they were letting in 15, 16-year-olds, but they were. And basically during that time, this was the late 70s, people would just kind of hand out drugs and not having anybody to tell me, that's dangerous, or to even care if I did those things. I did those things. And that's why I say it's kind of a miracle that I survived those years. But yeah, definitely at that point, religion was, I wanted to be, what I was supposed to be for the church. And I also wanted somebody to care. And so there was that constant fighting of, well, you can't, this is not okay, so you have to stop it, And so I was always ashamed of myself, always. And always felt bad about who I was anyway, because of my family and all. So yeah. And that's kind of what led into what happened in college, because once Tracey was gone, I wasn't connecting with the people there. I didn't know what to do about the whole faith thing because I was struggling with my identity as a person, not just sexuality, just who am I and why am I here? Because I didn't have any example. I was the only person in my family that graduated from high school, much less college. So even that whole mentality of this is what you do, when you get a certain age, I didn't get that, and so I didn't know what to do with myself. And I began to despair so much that November 10th, 1980, For 3 days in a row, I attempted suicide. I took whatever drugs I could find. I kept waking up, and this wasn't even illicit drugs. I would go down to the little local pharmacy and buy stuff that said it makes you drowsy, and would take it. And I don't know why, but I just kept waking up, except on the third day, I didn't wake up. And someone found me and this lengthy letter I had written about why I was doing it. And I was doing it because I was confused, because I felt like I didn't belong, and because I was ashamed, and I was tired. I was just tired from trying to figure it all out.
And this would have been what phase of your life? Would you still be in college at this
I was
point?
a freshman in college. Yeah, I was 18. And so this year's 44 years as a survivor. And so I'm grateful for that. But I was found and taken to a hospital. I don't remember that part, but I remember waking up in the hospital. And they actually let me stay in school, which they could have kicked me out, but they didn't. They let me stay, but I had to go see a counselor, and started to see a counselor. And it was seeing that counselor and, you know, and of course it was faith-based counseling. So I did get better, and I made the decision then to change my major to religion, because I was grateful to still be here. And I felt like, okay, yeah, this is why I was so messed up, because I was doing all these other things, and which is certainly partly true, not necessarily the relationship, but the drugs and all of that. And I attributed that to my faith, and so I changed my major to religion and religious education specifically, and got extremely involved in church work in college. I mean, I did like weekend revivals, which is where you go to a local church and you do services and stuff, again with the goal of bringing people to Christ. And I spoke to young people. I shared my testimony about surviving my suicide, and I sang. That was a big part of what I did, and did all of that throughout college, and then went into the ministry. So from there.
So would you say that was the part of your life where your faith was like the strongest?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Well, yes, and because even after that, even when I wasn't full-time in the ministry, that was still the core of my existence. I mean, I brought my kids up in the church. They were involved in the youth group. Their friends were like my kids too. They were all involved in the youth group. I have journals where that's all I wrote about was, my relationship with God, and what was going on with the person I ended up marrying, which is a whole other story. But yeah, so yeah, that was literally the core of my existence for almost 20 years, the most important thing, until I began to start thinking about it from a different angle.
So tell me about that. Well, do you remember the first time you had like a real serious doubt, or maybe the first time you let one actually creep in?
No, it's funny because for me it was literally almost an instantaneous thing. I mean, I had been doing ministry, and then because I was working full time in social work, which is extremely exhausting. I had the 2 kids. I had married a man that I met doing prison ministry, which should tell you a lot. Yeah, one of those people. Yeah, he was introduced to me by the chairman of deacons at the church I was working at as somebody who was, had changed his life and was with the Lord and was just needed a nice, strong Christian girl, which unfortunately wasn't true. I mean, we ended up getting married, and within a year I was pregnant and he was back in prison. So, yeah. So my faith became real important to me because of that. And I had to work, working in the church not only was my passion spiritually, but it's what helped me take care of my kids, because he was in prison, or doing drugs or running around or whatever for 17 years that I was married to him. And of course, in my journals, I've read back over how I prayed about that, and how, God, please change him because I'm married to him now, and that, I have to stay married to him because I made a vow and divorce isn't good and all that stuff. And I got tired, because at one point I was serving 2 churches and working full-time social work and taking care of my 2 sons. And I remember I was sitting in the car, I think even like at a stoplight, it was that instant, and I was thinking about God and the concept of unconditional love, right? Agape, in the Greek, and how, God supposedly loves us unconditionally, and as our Father, his love for us is perfect. And I started thinking about that, and then I started thinking about, well, wait a minute. Okay, I tell people and have lived that it's my job to make sure everyone has that salvation experience, that emotional moment or whatever it is, and says the words, says, I'm accepting Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, because if they don't, they're going to hell. I mean, that's what the Bible teaches. That's what we as evangelicals believed. That's your mission in life, is to make sure people know about Christ, because they're going to go to hell if they don't. And I started thinking, okay, I have 2 sons who I adore. Is there anything at all that they could do that would make me ever want to separate them or choose to separate them from me for eternity, and to do that in such a way that they suffer in a pit of fire everlasting, a place called hell, whatever that, is. I mean, just the fact of separation, you don't have to throw in the hellfire part, right? Is there anything they could do that would make me do that to them? And my immediate answer was absolutely not. There's nothing. And in that moment, I was like, my love is greater than this God that I've been taught about all these years, that I've been teaching about, because that's truly unconditional, is to love someone, Now, does that mean people shouldn't have consequences? Absolutely not. It's different, But I can't think of anybody, quite frankly, that I would ever want to throw into a pit, especially if it's just because they didn't say the words, or they didn't have this moment, or somebody didn't get to them in time. It's like, wait a minute. And so I began to step back and look at these words in this book from a perspective of true critical thinking, and it no longer made any sense to me, and still doesn't. The more I look at it, the less sense it makes. And I have those moments a lot now where I'm just like, this just, doesn't make sense. And, I'm not one of those, I'm certainly not, I don't know how I identify, to be honest. I've thought, am I atheist? Because I certainly don't believe in that God anymore. That being or whatever that, was written about in this book and created in my mind and delivered to me by these people. Do I think it's possible that there's some big divine something that set things in motion? Maybe, and if you look over history, there's so many things that we've attributed to gods that we now know scientifically, what that's about. So I think maybe agnostic is probably a better description for me. But yeah, so that's kind of the progression of how I got there. And it really was instantaneous. It was like, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, when I wasn't thinking about it from an emotional perspective, or from I need to believe this so that I can belong here, or I need to believe this so I'm okay, because I never felt like I was okay in my birth family. There was always something wrong with me. So, in the church, you had to, that's what I was constantly told, this is where we're trying to get you, to this place of salvation, because then you're going to be okay. Otherwise, you're not acceptable to us. And even that, when you think about that, it's like, who sets up a system like that? what's up with that? If I'm perfection, if I'm omniscient, if I'm all knowing, all loving, all powerful, I think I'd come up with something a little bit better. Does that make sense?
It does. Tell me about the emotions that followed that revelation. Did you have social ramifications, sort of an internal mental battle, or was it really just like, oh, well, that's it, I'm over it?
So at the time, I had already stopped serving the church just because I was tired from working, right? So I wasn't actually serving a church at the time. And but I was still teaching Sunday school and all. So I just kind of stopped going to church. And, I had folks that would, we miss you and, hope you'll come back kind of stuff. But then we ended up moving. And so it was kind of like organically I was able to move away from it without too many, like outward ramifications, I guess. But most of the time I don't talk about it because in my experience, people equate non-believers with amorality. So like if you're not of God, you're of the devil. If you're not, saved by grace, you're going to hell. So, and in my line of work too, especially where I live, this part of the world, there's a lot of people who are into their faith and to say, well, I don't believe in God, there's that sudden reaction of, well, first of all, oh my God, you're going to hell, and oh, what happened to you, or what's wrong with you? So I just found it easier not to talk about it, although that's kind of changing for me. I'm feeling more responsible to talk about it, which is one of the reasons why I'm here, because I think there's, again, if you get that perspective of stepping back, and I'm just going to talk about religion, not even God, just religion in general, and you look back over history and over time, there's so much abuse of power that was done in the name of religion. There's so much war, there's so many stomping on people's rights that was done in the name of religion that's still happening, and again outwardly happening. I don't remember in my lifetime it being this okay for people of faith, and again, I'm not talking about all people of faith, but the people that identify as evangelical for the purpose of being in power and taking away other people's rights. It's become dangerous, in my opinion. And so I feel some sense of responsibility to say, this is not okay. If I was still in the ministry, I've never been that person, even when I was in the ministry, even if I were to say, I'm not okay with your lifestyle, I don't think your lifestyle's okay, it would have never come from a place of hate. That's just not who I am, which is another reason, I always am cautious about saying I'm an atheist, because I don't want to be defined as someone who's immoral. And again, if people that know me, I would like to think they would be very confused to hear me say I'm an atheist. What do you mean you're an atheist? Because they equate that morality with you being a good Christian, right? In fact, the few people I have told have been, wait, what? But I think if I was still in the ministry, I would be that person right now on Facebook and on YouTube saying, put the brakes on people, because this is not okay. This is not the Jesus that I, knew. This is not what he would be okay with. This is a bastardization of the gospel, is how I would probably be talking about it. And I'm quite frankly been very disappointed in my friends who say, don't put me with all those other folks that are, calling for homosexuals to be lined up and shot in the head, and, trying to take away people's rights for being able to make certain choices and all, and talking about violence against people like that. I'm not hearing what should be legitimate Christians, if they are following what I think Christ would do, say enough. And it makes me angry. And I've called out a few of my friends on that because I'm like, why are you not condemning those behaviors, those pastors that are saying we should kill people who don't believe what we believe? Help me understand, because I think Jesus would have been right in the mix with those people. If he's who, I saw him to be when I was, as a person, and not even as a deity, just as a human being, I don't think he would have been aligned with that. So that's been really frustrating for me. And I'm in a band that's all, faith, except for one person I think who's not. But, they pray before shows, and I respectfully stand in the circle and hold hands and while they do their thing. And, again, I respect people's right to believe what they choose to. And I don't, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't give it the same weight that I would have when I was, like, if you tell me you're a Christian, I'm automatically going to think, oh, okay, this is so great. Robert's a good person, and Robert wants good things for people. I don't know anything about you, right? I mean, you could be a pedophile for all I know, right? I'm sure you're not, but
Yeah,
but I'm just saying, I don't know anything about you.
Sure.
So, but if you were to have said to me, I'm an atheist, again, all of this as an evangelical Christian, that conjures up a whole another, this is a misinformed, uneducated, probably, not very moral. I bet he does drugs. I bet he has illicit sex. That's how people, that whole judgment thing that people supposedly aren't doing.
Sure.
Sure they
Maybe
are.
they're thinking, I'm not judging, I'm just saying facts, right? Like, I just
Exactly.
know this is how you are.
Exactly, yeah. And to me, that's dangerous. That's divisive. That's, not productive. It's certainly not unconditional love, which is what faith is supposed to be all about. So.
And your parables like Good Samaritan,
Yeah,
or just, I'm
exactly.
going to wash a street person's feet, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it seems very incompatible with, let me tell you everyone what to do or what's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was even thinking today, because if you go back and read the Bible with what's the word I'm looking for? Just with new lenses, okay, with the scales falling off, as the Bible would say. I started to think, I started to make a list of adjectives about God based on stories in the Bible, and it would be, if you're objective, it's not loving, it's not those things that people like to say. Not that there aren't moments in the Bible that talk about that, but it's murderer. I mean, the Old Testament is full of God's wrath against people who didn't do things exactly the way he wanted, and his response was to murder them. Geez, isn't that a commandment? Thou shalt not kill, which if you go back to the original Greek, the word is murder, but yet he's doing it. Okay, so he sets that example, but we're not allowed to do that, right? There's a story of where he's killed children. So they're infanticide. We're not supposed to do that, but it's okay for him to do that, and we should worship him for it. It just doesn't make sense. It's an oxymoron. The whole situation doesn't make sense when you get back. And if you look at that person objectively with those adjectives, it's like, I don't understand. This doesn't make sense anymore.
It sounds like being a parent was a big part for your perspective shift on that.
Mm-hmm.
When you were still in the pulpit, was there anything you told yourself? Did you ever have a thought pop up like, hey, but why can't I be ordained as a minister? Or
all the time.
Why is there so much wrath, right? So did you have a go-to system for that cognitive dissonance?
I think I just pushed it down because, my first incident of that was, and this wasn't so much about being a woman as it was just being a creative. The very first church that I served, I was an intern for the summer, and I had spent hours on this teacher. I was going to work with the Sunday school teachers on teaching skills, and we were having a Saturday thing, and I can't remember what was I calling it. It was something to do with not missing the mark, which is the definition of the word sin. Sin's missing the mark, right? So I had made this big target in the sanctuary. It was like huge, and put it up on the wall, and I had hung this arrow down where it was like hanging on the wall to catch everybody's attention so that they'd want to come, like advertising my class. And OMG, I got in so much trouble because I had, this was our holy sanctuary, and here I had, how dare I put this thing in there? And I was like, huh? I remember just being so confused. It's like, but, I'm trying to, build excitement and get people to want to come. And so that was the first time I remember somebody just crashing. And then the second, well, actually that was the second time. The first time it was a summer job, and the pastor had hired me without getting the congregation's full support. And there were two women that apparently didn't like the fact that I was a woman. Women, now how interesting is that? So, and we did a thing called Youth Sunday, where the youth were in charge of the whole service, and I had the kids, doing all this contemporary music and doing, they did the sermon, they did everything, right? And those two ladies sat on the front pew, took out their emery boards, and filed their nails to show that their contempt. No lie. Yeah. And I remember going, well, same thing. What is this? I don't understand, what? How is that okay? But I didn't say anything, and the pastor just said, well, they have a problem with women, and, but I think it's fine that you're here. And yeah, I mean, I clearly wasn't then who I am now, because I certainly would have plenty to say about that now. But I didn't know what to do with that, because, okay, I see it, 2 Corinthians, I think it's second. I can't remember now. It's either 1 or 2 Corinthians where it talks about, women should not stand up and speak in the church. And I just read that little verse like they gave it to me and said, okay, I get it, can't do it. Completely taken out of context, but that's a whole nother.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you experienced folks who will sort of pick their favorite thing out of the Bible, and then if you were to say bring up the killing children, it's like, okay, but that's not really important, right? But the homosexuality condemnation is really important for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Right? I'm curious to hear any examples that you would hear people bring up to you a lot in that fashion, or was there anything you did like that if you were to talk to a skeptic back in the day when you were evangelizing?
It's funny because I don't remember, and maybe it's because I had my own experience in the LGBTQ community, that was just never a factor for me. My focus was truly, I just want to bring you to Christ. Whatever he do with that afterwards is your business. Which I do believe there are a lot of folks out there who are like that. This is my faith. I'm compelled to tell you and bring you to Christ, and then what happens after that is between you and God and whatever. And I think that was more like that. I mean, I certainly, would have, and I'm sure I did, teach that lifestyle is not okay, that the Bible says, one man and one woman gets married or whatever. But, even now, it's just frustrating. It's like, I don't remember. I think maybe part of it was because I wasn't brought up in the evangelical church, so that it wasn't so ingrained in me that it was painful to let go of a lot of that, or painful to be able to do that critical thinking, for which I'm grateful, because I have a lot of friends that I've talked to who will say, I don't judge others. Perfect example. Had a friend who said, a gay person comes into my church, they're perfectly welcome. I said, okay. Drag queen walks into your church, full drag, sits on the front row. How do you feel about that? He said, well, that would just be disrespectful. I said, in what way? He said, well, just for them to come in there like that. Why would they do that? I said, because that's who they are. And he said, well, and I mean, I couldn't even get him there to even stop and think about what he was saying, because I don't know if it's indoctrinated. I don't know if it's, that we just convince ourselves. I don't know what it is, but I do think it's almost to the point of brainwashing in some ways. And I think that's because of that whole guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are very powerful emotions. I mean, that's how so many children are perpetually abused in home, by the people that supposedly love them. I mean, it's not unlike that, where you're in this situation where people show you this love and acceptance, but you still have to be this in order for us to still love and accept you. Even though we say we're going to love you unconditionally, we're going to love you unconditionally, but you can't look like this, or you can't be this, or do this. And again, that makes no sense, right? That's, I can't think of the word, but paradoxical, it's, and he, I just couldn't even get him there. I said, what difference does it make if a man comes in a dress and sits on the front row and looks better than your wife does with his makeup on? I mean, who cares, Do you really think Jesus would care? I said, I think Jesus would probably walk him up the aisle. Yeah.
It's like we don't need to explain why we have this strong conviction.
Yes.
Just that we know that this is true.
Absolutely. Yeah. And why would it bother you? Because, I mean, if you really dig into yourself, you'd have to be able to accept it. Bothers me because I do believe somewhere deep inside that there's something wrong with this individual. They're not acceptable like they are. So I'm not loving them unconditionally. And you're not. There's no way you can say that you are if you say, well, come on in, but not really. Or come on in, but don't look like that, And that frustrates me. So most of the time I don't get into those conversations because people lack the ability to critically think, or they fear the ability to critically think. I honestly think a lot of it is that. There are several verses in the Bible that tell you not to critically think. And when you get that perspective and you start thinking about, the Bible was actually written by humans. I wonder what their motive was to put verses like that in there. When we talk about power and control, let's build this ship in such a way that if somebody, that we can make people feel guilty and ashamed so we can keep them in line. And that's why I find it dangerous now, because I think it's being used in some situations to harm people. And people have convinced themselves that it's right. It's of God, this being that has the power to supposedly, do all things. So how can I go against that?
Why should I even listen to a single thing if I'm that convicted that
yes.
the creator of the universe literally not only agrees with me, but wants me to do what I'm doing?
Exactly.
And creates an impossible to negotiate type of situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like to, and I think I shared this with, I'm part of a group called the Clergy Project, which are people like me who once were in the ministry and have come to the conclusion that the things they believed, they don't anymore. Some of the people in the Clergy Project are still in the ministry.
Wow.
And are definitely underground, but for lots of reasons you mentioned, can't, they, maybe because they won't have a job anymore. Often it's because their spouse would leave them with their children. I've seen situations like that. They are in communities, they're extended families, where if they were to say, I'm doubting, they would literally be cast out, which again is not unconditional. It's sad. It's just really sad, because if something can stand up to the test, why not question it? You should be able to open the doors wide and say, hit me, give me any question you want, because I'm going to have the answer to that. I've had many conversations with God, even after I stopped believing in God. That's where I say that, if you really are there, If you're really all powerful, if this is really the way it's supposed to be, why the hell are you hiding? Why did you set it up this way? Why aren't you available to me? And then as a social worker, the thought of, God's supposedly everywhere, right? At all times. Okay, well, where was he when that little child I just talked to was being sexually abused? You telling me he was sitting in the room doing nothing? Why would I worship that? Why would I want to give up my life for that? It makes me angry. It gives me chills. It makes me so angry. So if that is who you are, we need to have a conversation, because that's fucked up. I know you probably have to edit that, but but it is. I mean, it's like, what is that? How does that make any sense at all? I mean, it just doesn't. It's just like the Bible says, pray without ceasing. Whatever you ask in my name, you shall receive. I really wish that we had a way to keep the data on how many times people have prayed and their prayers were answered the way they needed to be answered. Of course, the grift was, well, sometimes God says no because that's better. I mean, how convenient is it to always have answers like that? How easy is it to control the masses when you can flip the story like that? So, yeah. So I think about it all the time. I think about it through that lens even now, and I get frustrated. I would like to have more conversations, and I find that the ones I have had, it's people don't listen to understand. They listen to respond, because they've been told your job is to convert me. So if your job's to convert me, you're not going to listen to what I have to say. You're going to be thinking, what can I do to make her understand she's wrong? I've even had somebody say that to me. I've had somebody say, as an atheist, you're a better Christian than many Christians that I know, which I take that as a compliment, because I don't want to have that definition of atheist being amoral, right? And I'm like, think about what you just said.
Still has that assumption built in, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if that's true, how can I be that way if I'm of the devil? How can I be okay?
Like take the logic one step further, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute. And that person has said to me, I'm praying for you because I know that you're going to come back to us one day. I'm like, yeah, no, keep on praying, and I never left. I mean, I'm still here. I'm still who I always was. I like to think better because, I can critically think, through situations now, and not just make assumptions about people and what they need and who they are. I ask a lot more questions than I try to provide answers. Learn more that way. So yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about literally any of this? It's been such a pleasure.
I would love for the nuns, what we call the nuns now, to start trying to have those conversations. And by nuns, we're talking about NONES. So on, applications where you have to, where you're, or in the hospital or wherever they ask you what your faith is or your religion is, there's like, Baptist, Methodist, Episcopal, and then there's none. So I'm a nun. Yeah, I don't have any of those anymore. NONE. And I feel like it's important to talk about that. Why? Why am I? And not to change your mind, not to change your mind in that if your faith brings you comfort, that's awesome. It's just like anybody that, I have mantras that I follow in life. Leap and the net will appear is one of them I like. And, just the whole sayings that make you feel good about life. I think there's things in the Bible that can make people feel good and make good decisions about life. And I think it's perfectly fine if you embrace those things, philosophies, beliefs, whatever. And I also think it's important to create a space where, where others can be who they are, and you can learn from them things that might even enhance your life. Don't be afraid of it. Step back. I tell social workers that when working with families, because they're real quick to look at, oh, they messed up. They did this abuse or this neglect. That's not all of who they are. That's a moment in time. There's a bigger picture about who that family is. There's a bigger picture about who atheists and agnostics are, and Buddhists and Christians and everybody. There's a bigger picture. Let's talk instead of condemning one another, and be open to learning something. If you have to be afraid to hear about who I am, that to me suggests that there's an insecurity on your side. If your faith won't stand up to the test, then you probably need to rethink what you're believing in. So that's probably what I'd say.
Well, thank you for your courage to talk about these difficult things. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
It's great.